I secretly took shots with my ex at my wedding day party. What he did next ruined me. Hello, Reddits. My name is Eve, and I'm 27 years old. This is my first post here, and for anonymity's sake, I'll like to keep the real names of the people I'll be mentioning a secret. Honestly, I cannot say exactly how I found myself here, but I do know why I'm here. To pour out my heart, and in a deluded state of mind, I think maybe I'll be able to get some sort of help or advice or something that will help me return my life back to the way it has always been. I'm married. I don't even know if I have the right to say that right now, but I am. Well, I cannot exactly call it a marriage when it's only been 2 weeks and my marriage is already failing, and it's totally my fault because I ruined everything. A bride's most memorable day would be her wedding, right? Well, mine is the opposite. It turned out to be the worst day of my life. My husband, Simon, had made sure of that, and now he's planning to get an annulment, and it doesn't even help that everyone so far has kept their distance from me because of what happened. It's painful, because it had been because of a silly action of mine. I had actually taken some shots of my ex secretly at my wedding party, because I thought he looked funny, and I was only planning on showing him after the wedding, his expression while tasting a drink that was probably not half as bad as he was making it to be. It was an innocent action, but apparently Simon had seen me doing that, and he had snatched my phone right out of my hand and smashed it in front of me and all of our 100 guests at the wedding, including his family and mine. You can imagine the shock on everyone's faces, and on mine too when he did that, but Simon only did something else right there, something that has now forever marked me for life. The thing is, although I innocently took that picture, which normally would only have just made Simon, who was always cool-headed, a bit annoyed, something else had happened between my ex and I. 2 months back, before the wedding, I reconnected with my ex, Dave. We met coincidentally at a mall when I was shopping for some jewelry for my wedding. He had apparently come to buy jewelry for his wife. Dave and I had a long history together. We were together for almost 5 years until he decided to abandon me, and the next time I heard from him, 2 days after, was to hear that he had gotten married to his childhood friend and lover, who was apparently heavily pregnant then. I was really devastated and angry. Dave never called to apologize or anything, and he didn't even have the guts to tell me himself that he was getting married. He never broke up with me properly, and even though I assumed that we were each other's everything, Dave apparently thought the opposite. We met in the university and dated through the whole 4 years of schooling, and everyone knew us then in school as the power couple. We were always together, and we sort of knew what the other person would be if we weren't. I thought we were soulmates, but apparently we weren't. Apparently Dave was cheating on me, or maybe he was cheating on her with me. It was all a bit confusing and devastating when I found out the truth. I tried severally to reach out to Dave so I could get some sort of explanation or an apology for what he did, but he had blocked me from every means of reaching out to him. Even his friends back then pretended like they didn't know he had a girlfriend until he got married. I knew they were pretending because I saw the picture of the wedding from her page on Instagram after stalking a few people to find out exactly who she was, and they were all there as friends of the groom, grinning from ear to ear. I really was broken, and for the next 2 years I just barely survived, still hurting. It was in that way Simon had met me. Simon was the one who pulled me right up and helped me get over the hurt from Dave. And when he finally asked me to be his girlfriend, there was no hesitation on my mind. I met Simon at a book club meeting where I had gone because my friends had forced me to. They wanted me to get myself out there and started doing things that I loved again, which included reading books from my favorite author. That day I met Simon, my favorite author. Yes, Simon is a writer, and a pretty famous and good one at that. I was so excited to meet him at that book club meeting, and I stayed back just to get his autograph. Simon had apparently noticed me during the meeting, and he was anticipating seeing me again. We talked for a total of 5 minutes, but it felt like we had known each other for years because of how easy it was to just talk to him. Simon knew more about me than I ever told anyone else within that 5 minutes, and he had eventually asked for my number, which I gave him excitedly. That night, Simon texted me and we spoke for most of the night. I was too happy to even sleep, and I think it was the same for him. So we stayed up and talked about everything and anything, ranging from different topics, both silly and serious. I told him that very night of the first day we met about Dave and how the hurt had shaped my life. Simon had told me about his ex too, who hadn't been comfortable with his fame and kept getting paranoid about him cheating because most of his fans are from the feminine gender. She had ended up doing the one thing she kept accusing him of, cheating, and he ended things with her when he found out. Funny how I had compared us together and told him how much I now detest people that cheat, but I had gone ahead to do the same thing eventually. Well, after that night of chatting with Simon, we became really close, and we started hanging out together more often than was necessary. We started dating 2 weeks after meeting. My friends, when I told them, were surprised and weary because of how my last relationship had turned out, and they wanted to meet Simon, and when they had, they supported our relationship. Simon was really the sweetest person I had the privilege of meeting. He was kind, patient, and also so romantic, unlike Dave, who had been very impatient and was always emotionally blackmailing me into doing his biddings while we were still together. Simon never forced me to do anything against my will. He learnt to understand my moods, and he knew the right things to say to make me happy whenever I was sad. He took me out on dates, and he created this happy bubble for us which would have lasted forever if I hadn't ruined things. He met my parents within 3 months of our relationship, and they fell in love with him. He was polite enough to ask my parents properly to court me, even though we literally live in a different generation from them. My father was obviously pleased with him for doing so, and my mom too was always talking about how handsome and good her future son-in-law is. Simon also introduced me to his family too. His mom was the only one in the picture. His dad had apparently cheated on his mom and had another family, so Simon cut him off. And never mind that the man has tried severally to appeal to them. His 2 younger sisters were so lovable, and his mom adored me. It made me relieved because I didn't have to deal with the insecurity of not knowing his family, and perhaps having to guess whether he had a childhood friend turned lover waiting for him to get ready for marriage. Everything was working perfectly well between us. We were really happy. Everyone envied us, especially our friends. Our relationship was, and still is, very different from what I had with Dave. Simon was everything I ever wanted in a man, and he was just proving that in many ways, so I had no doubt about it. We started living together after about 8 months of dating, and I loved every moment of it. Simon was surprisingly domesticated. He enjoyed doing the chores, and although most times we did it together, he was the one doing the most of it. All I'm trying to say with all of these descriptions is that my relationship with Simon was perfect. We did have our moments where we argued, but we always settled it with a kiss and apology from both sides and often a make-up sex. But it was still perfect regardless. Simon proposed to me on my birthday, and it had been a total surprise. He managed to organize a party without my knowledge, even though we literally lived together, and he invited all our friends and families with me, not having a single clue. I thought he had even forgotten about my birthday because he said nothing of it, and when I mentioned it in passing, he had dismissed it, focusing on the new book he was writing. But to my ultimate surprise, I had gotten home from work after getting no calls or texts that were usually bombarding my phone from my loved ones, hoping to go to bed when I heard many people screaming, "Surprise!" Immediately I stepped inside the house. I was shocked and happy, and the highlight of the party had been when they all parted, and I saw Simon on one knee with a ring in his hand. I was happy, and I even cried tears of joy in saying yes to the man I love and saying yes to spending a lifetime with him. It was a memorable day, and I remember it like it was just yesterday. But everything changed when I met him again, Dave, at that mall randomly. Simon and I had planned to take our time in preparing for our wedding. I wanted to have the best wedding ever, and we didn't want any rushed affair. We had our lifetimes together, so we felt there was no need to rush anything. So that day, I went shopping with one of my closest friends, who was going to be my best lady at my wedding. We were shopping for matching jewelries, and then I bumped into him. I was shocked to see him, and we said awkward hellos. My friend who knew him and how much hurt he caused me just literally hissed and walked off to another session of jewelries. Dave told me he expected that, and he told me that he was sorry he never got to apologize properly for what he did to me, and he regrets his actions so much. I believed him, and I told him it was all in the past, and when I got to find out the reason he was there, I told him my own happy news too. He looked genuinely happy for me. Well, I thought he was so, when he asked for my number, I had given him thinking we were already past that stage in our lives. But then we started texting, He apologized again for leaving me hanging in the past, and I dismissed it as nothing. At first, the texts were really random. Just a hi in the morning and perhaps a how did your day go in the evening. The crazy thing is, I never told Simon about meeting Dave again. I thought it wasn't something worth mentioning, so I just kept it to myself. The texting between Dave and I became more consistent. He was asking how the preparations for the wedding was going, and he was even giving me tips for how to spend wisely and efficiently for the wedding. I thought it was all harmless, and when he invited me out randomly for lunch outside the company where I worked, I decided to go since it was my lunch break. We didn't even talk much. We just ate and made small conversation, unlike in our chats. We started meeting up even more often than was necessary. When I wasn't in the office working or shopping for some wedding necessities, I was having lunch or coffee with Dave. He told me that he was having problems in his marriage. He wanted a divorce because he apparently caught his wife cheating, and she was then threatening him to take away their child if he tried to divorce her. I felt pity for him and anger on his behalf. No one should be with a cheating spouse. It was understandable when you guys weren't committed or in any relationship of some sort, but not in a marriage. So I kept comforting him, asking how the whole process was going. Dave told me he moved out of the house and was staying at a hotel temporarily because he couldn't stand being at home with her while she texted her lover right in front of him. Then one day, Dave texted me. He was feeling really sick, and he wanted me to help him get some medications and food, because apparently the food in the hotel was bad. I rushed over with everything he asked for after closing hours from work. I texted Simon that a friend was feeling sick and that I was going to be home late. I didn't specify which friend it was. I let him assume that it was one of my female friends, and given the fact that he wasn't even aware of Dave being in the picture again. I got there, and he was truly sick, so I took care of him, made sure he ate some food, took the medications, and let him sleep. I stayed until late in the evening when he finally woke up before I left. Well, actually, before I left, something happened between us. Dave had held my hand, thanking me for staying with him and getting him the medications and food, and then he kissed me. I was so shocked because it really was unexpected, so I couldn't move, and Dave just continued kissing me until I had the decency to push him off, and I left. That night, as I laid in bed next to Simon, I kept thinking about the kiss. For some strange reason, part of me felt thrilled at being kissed by him again, and the other part of me felt irritated by it. That night, my phone beeped with a text from Dave. He was texting to apologize for what he did, but I didn't respond to the text. I needed space to process exactly what my feelings had been at that moment. But it didn't take very long for me to make my decision. Well, a decision that has now ended up ruining everything perfect in my life. I slept with Dave. Well, the first time could have been considered a mistake, but when it happened the second, third, and numerous times more than I could count. The night before my wedding had not been excluded from the days I would count as days I slept with Dave. The first time it actually happened had been 2 days after we first kissed. Dave had begged me to come over again because he wanted to apologize, and stupidly I had agreed to it. I thought that seeing him physically would be able to enforce what I wanted to say to him. I had planned to tell him reasons why we couldn't work, and why what happened could never happen again, except he didn't want our friendship anymore. But when I got there, I did a different thing entirely. Dave sat on the bed and I on the only couch in the room, and he apologized for what he did, blaming it on the sickness and on me. Yes, he blamed me for being so beautiful, and reminding him of how everything had been between us in the past, and how much he regrets abandoning me. I sat there feeling really pleased by the fact that he still wanted me after abandoning me. He was regretting his actions, and that was all that mattered to me. All the speech I practiced before getting there had gone out of my head. I was only concentrating on seeing him with that expression of regret on his face. Then Dave had come to the couch and caressed my cheeks, and before I knew it, we were kissing. Again. This time there wasn't any stopping or pushing anyone away because I was kissing him back. And somehow we ended up on the bed in the room with our clothes flung in different directions in the room. We were indulging in the act like we never stopped before. Dave had always known his way around my body, even when we were together. It had been one of the reasons I was so devastated when we broke up, besides the fact that I did love him. He was very good in bed, And I remember I used to love it when he behaved like a caveman when we were having sex. It was only after we were done with the whole thing and panting rather heavily that unfamiliar sense of guilt set in. I just did the one thing I had always preached against with the same person that did the exact same thing to me. I quietly picked my clothes scattered around the room, and I wore them quickly and practically ran out of the room and went straight home. Luckily, Simon wasn't home. He had gone to a book club meeting in another town and wouldn't be back for another 2 days. That night, I couldn't sleep partly because of guilt and partly because of thinking of the pleasure I had while I was with Dave. He texted me again that night. I enjoyed making love to you today after so long, and I'm sorry if you regret it, but I don't. I kept reading and rereading the text over and over again. We only had sex, we didn't make love, but he apparently thought otherwise if his text was anything to go by. The crazy thing is, I went back to his hotel room for a repeat of that day, and it was as wild as the first day had been. So I made this conclusion in my head. I never exactly got the chance to break things off with him properly. Maybe that was why what was happening between us was happening. So I was going to sleep with him until I got the clothes off that I needed, and then dump him the same way he had done to me. I'm cringing as I type that because I was obviously delirious when I thought that. But at that point, it was the only explanation that made sense for me to continue sleeping with Dave and enjoying it too. I made sure that Simon didn't suspect anything, and that wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be because Simon was working on a book that he wanted to turn into his publisher before our wedding. He wanted us to have enough time together during and after the wedding, and it wouldn't work if his publisher was pressing on him to write something. So most of his time was spent in his mini office at home, or when he was out of town for research for his book. Sarah suspected me first, my friend who was also really close to me. She asked who I was always texting and sending different pictures to when I was with them, because she knew it wasn't Simon, especially after she saw a suspicious text on my phone from Dave. I lied that it was some longtime friend whom we just reconnected. The other girls believed me, but Sarah didn't, and she warned me that day to not ruin what I had with Simon. Instead of taking her warning seriously, I got so angry and accused her of being jealous, especially because she knew Simon first and had a tiny crush on him back then. I know because she told me and had promised me that it had only been for a short while, and she didn't feel that way again about him. Sarah was upset when I accused her, and she left and told me to count her out of my wedding preparations. I didn't mind letting her go. In fact, I even blocked her on every means of reaching out to me because I didn't want her in my life anymore. Maybe because the truth was I was scared that she might be right, and I was already doing the one thing that I knew that Simon would never forgive. Having someone remind me of the consequences was scary, so I just cut her off instead. But I wish I heeded her warnings then, because it means I will not be here right now, trying to explain my horrible decisions and actions to people who will probably judge me, and might not be able to proffer a solution to my problem presently. But as you can guess, I hadn't. I had not listened, and now it's one of the decisions I regret the most. I have no idea when Simon started to suspect me. Perhaps it was from the late-night texts from Dave that would lit my phone and disturb our sleep from its loud announcement of a text. Or maybe it was that day that I slipped and had called Simon Dave while we were having sex. Although I managed to lie and tell him he was probably too caught up in the mood and hadn't heard properly. Or maybe, just maybe, it was Sarah who decided to take her observations to Simon. All I know is that on my wedding day, which was supposed to be my happiest, Simon had revealed the one thing I thought I was hiding so perfectly well. All I know is 2 days before the wedding, Simon started to act really odd. He was not showing up for testing of the cake, and he didn't show up for the ring adjustments. I had to guess his size, and with faith collected the rings, hoping it would fit perfectly this time. He didn't try to even excuse his behavior, and instead of confronting him about it, I decided to leave him be. I chalked it down to stress of having to finish the book before our wedding day. Although I knew he was done with the book already, I just concluded that it was the pressure from the work, so I did all the remaining preparations myself, with help from our families and my friends, but without any sort of assistance from him. Because of the busy preparations for the wedding, I had taken time off work and I was barely seeing Dave anymore. I thought of it as good because I knew I could never cheat on Simon after we exchanged our vows, so it was best he got used to not seeing me again. Then that night before my wedding at my bridal shower, I got a text from Dave. He was apparently lodged in the room next to where I was with the girls. So I excused myself, lied that I had someone deliver a package to the hotel, and instead I had gone to meet Dave. I told him then that things couldn't continue between us and that we were done. Dave had accepted my decision, but he begged me for one last time together, and I complied before going back to the party. Although I lied to the girls that the package delivered was the wrong one, and I had a bit of an issue with the delivery man, and they all believed me, everything went on well after that, and then it was the next morning, the morning of my wedding. I got dressed with the help of the girls in my perfect wedding dress and got my hair and makeup done by a professional. Everything was happening the way it ought until it just wasn't. Usually the groom would arrive before the bride and wait on the altar in front of the priest while the bride comes in, but mine had been entirely different. I was the one waiting at the altar impatiently while Simon showed up half drunk and his shirt not properly stocked in and his hair looking like he just woke up. I was pissed and also surprised because Simon was one of the most neat and organized people I knew. He finally got to the altar and the priest started the wedding speech and then the vows. It felt like every word was dragged out of Simon's mouth. He didn't look like the guy that had proposed to me in front of our loved ones. He felt different, and he looked at me differently too. After we were pronounced husband and wife, Simon didn't bother with kissing me. He just left. It really was embarrassing, but I managed to smile and move past it. Then it was time for our wedding party. I had changed into my short dress so I could easily dance and walk freely like I couldn't with the white wedding dress. Simon stood at the bar and was drinking with his friends. He paid me no attention. He didn't even glance at me once. I was really upset, and it was then I noticed Dave at my party. He was standing awkwardly beside a table looking so out of place, and he then took a drink, took a sip, and his expression was so funny. I took out my phone and secretly took a picture of him thinking to show him later how funny his expression was. But what I didn't know was that Simon had noticed that, and he just came to me and collected my phone and smashed it on the floor. I was so shocked, and when I asked him what he was doing, he shouted angrily at me. He was telling me how insulting I was being by inviting my lover to our wedding and still having the guts to take a picture of him. I was so shocked when he said that, and I tried to deny it at first and make it look like he was just being paranoid. By then, everywhere was quiet and everyone was watching our interaction. Simon hissed, and he brought out some pictures and flung them at me. When I picked them up, I was so shocked I dropped them. They were pictures of Dave and I from last night. When I entered his room, and when I was coming out an hour later, those were still even deniable, but there were pictures of me in Dave's room having sex there too. I didn't know I was crying until the first drop of tear touched my cheek. I opened my mouth and closed it severally, my throat so clogged that no words were coming out. Simon told me he only married me because he didn't want to disgrace the family by canceling at the last minute, but he couldn't go ahead with it anymore. Not after what I still had the guts to do during the wedding. By now, Dave was nowhere to be found. He must have ran out when he discovered that the whole issue was about him. But I wasn't even concerned about him. Simon was looking at me with so much contempt and anger that it was slicing through my heart so painfully I could literally feel it. Simon started to walk out, but I knelt and held his leg begging him to stay and forgive me. But Simon only pushed me off and promised to get back to me with an annulment. It was only after he left that I realized that everyone was staring at me in shock. The pictures were in different hands, and they were all gasping as they saw each incriminating evidence of my affair. I did the only thing my brain could process at that moment. I ran. I ran as much as my short dress could allow, and I boarded a cab as soon as I could get one, and I left the ruins that remained from my party. I remember vaguely lodging into a hotel and crying my eyes out throughout the night. I stayed there, refusing to turn on my phone or speak to anyone for 2 whole days, which I spent crying and regretting everything I had done. When I eventually turned on my phone, it was to see different messages from people insulting and calling me different names that I'd rather not name here. I was blocked from a lot of accounts owned by people I once knew and laughed with. But there was no message. None at all from Simon. I tried texting him only to realize that I've been blocked. I tried going over to the house after a week had passed, and I realized that Simon had changed the locks and another dreadful sight had been my bag sitting in the garage. It just has been there for days because they were mostly covered up with dust and wet from rain. There was no one I could reach or talk to help me apologize or beg for forgiveness. Everyone was staying away from me, including my own family. My mother had called me and spoken to me so badly, and then she had sworn to kill me if she ever saw me again after the disgrace I caused her. My father said nothing, but I knew he was saying a lot with his silence too. But nothing hurts as much as losing Simon, guys. I don't know if I'm being delirious having this tiny bit of hope that somehow and someday that Simon would forgive me. Am I wrong? Update. Hello, Reddits. I saw him again. I saw Simon after so many months had passed. I saw him for the first time after the wedding, and he wasn't alone. He was with a girl, no, a woman. She was beautiful and had gap teeth when she smiled at him. He held the door of the car for her, and she reached out and kissed his cheek before entering into the car, while Simon grinned before going to his side of the car, entered, and then zoomed off. For months, I was able to delude myself into believing that if I kept looking for ways to make up for what I did, Simon would eventually see the sincerity in my actions and take me back. It didn't matter to me what you guys thought because you obviously had a lot to say, and they all weren't nice things. It didn't matter to me the stigmatization I got from everyone who ever knew me and those who never did but heard of what I did. It didn't matter that there was only a 0.6% chance that Simon was going to forgive me. It didn't matter that our marriage was annulled after only 1 month, which we never even got to spend together. I was willing to hold on to it and hang on, hoping that someday and somehow Simon would look at me again the same way he had always done. It could have taken months or years, but I didn't mind. I was willing to wait until that day when he would tell me that he was over everything I did. But it's now so obvious just how delusional I was being because Simon never had the intention of forgiving me, and he never will. He's moved on. I can literally feel my heart breaking and squeezing really tight in my chest as I typed that. Simon has moved on with a woman that isn't me. Someone who will probably not take his love for granted like I did. Someone who would love him very much and would never think to cheat like I did. Someone who will never let him lose his cool like he did on our wedding day. Our wedding day. That day that has now imprinted on my memory forever and keeps replaying over and over again like a broken recorder. That day when Simon had looked at me with disgust and anger, and not the usual love I saw in his eyes. I've had to stick to getting information about him from the 2 books he had published after the whole thing with me. Not once did he mention me, and I had become a forgotten past, a nobody to Simon, and that hurts more than I can ever say. It hurts to think and know that Simon has now totally moved on from me. He no longer loves me or thinks of me. Perhaps the only thoughts he'll have of me will be ones where he remembers just how stupidly I had behaved. I have nothing anymore. No one was on my side. I lost my job because my boss and my coworkers had been at that party when I was exposed so publicly. My boss wanted no stains on his company name, so he had told me to resign instead of him having to fire me. My parents still won't speak to me. I tried calling my mom with a new phone number I got, and she picked up on the second ring, sounding so happy, and I could hear my father laughing in the background. It was obvious they've thought nothing of me since that day, so I just ended the call and never called again. She didn't call me back either. She must have guessed who it was. It's funny how the one person that I did it with is no longer in the picture. I found out somehow that he lied to me. He was the one who cheated on his wife and not the other way round. And now with me as number 2 evidence to the court that he couldn't provide a stable home to his kids. He is now divorced and with no access to his kid whatsoever. More than half of his lifetime inheritance and savings was given to his wife and kid, so he's left broke. I guess he does deserve it. But his punishment isn't as great as mine because I've lost everything because I was too stupid to see just what Dave had always been in my life, a disaster. Knowing that I will forever be stuck in this bottomless pit of hell is as horrifying as it is painful. Every day the pain keeps intensifying, and it's almost unbearable now, especially after seeing Simon looking so happy with another woman. Simon was the best and perfect man for me, but I was too stupid to see just how much I was ruining my life by being with Dave until it just was too late. I wish that I had done better. I wish I had run for the hills when I saw Dave that day. I wish I hadn't been as stupid to fall for his theatrics again. My case should have been the once bitten, twice shy case, but instead, I have ended my life as far away as possible from people who once loved me. I've now known loneliness as a companion and silence as my comfort and horror. Goodbye, guys. This is my last post here, and I sure hope you learned something from my sad, miserable life.